Thank you, David, and thank you everyone for coming here today on a Friday morning. This is a kind of a difficult topic for a doctor, for an oncologist, to try to bring clinical trials to patients with the rationale why we should, if possible, participate. So I'm going to try as much as possible to talk in lay term here. My outline is going to really include the definition of a clinical trial. What's a clinical trial? What's a trial? What are we trying here? What's the type of clinical trial? What are the past clinical trials in kidney cancer that completely changed the field? Do we have any current or planned clinical trial going at a large level in the country that may bring the drugs to the market? And what are our menu at the Dana-Farber Harvard Cancer Center? We have over 10, 15 clinical trials, and I'm going to highlight some examples, of these. And what's the rationale, perhaps, for patient participation, if patients are eligible and willing. So this is the definition if you take any textbook. A clinical trial is a study conducted really to allow safety and efficacy data to be collected for an intervention. Now the intervention may be a new drug, maybe an older drug but in another indication, maybe a combination of an old drug and a new drug or two new drugs, or it could be a device. I mean, a lot of our cardiologists or surgeons do clinical trials comparing old device to a new device. Or it could be a whole treatment protocol. We see that a lot in childhood leukemias, where there are interventions that include multiple drugs, multiple cancer drugs, and steroid, and different schedules. The principle of clinical trial, if you want to go back and dig, and that's being in med school, one of the courses we study is the history of medicine. How did medicine really come to the 20th or 21st century? And the principle of clinical trials, if you look at the textbooks, dates to more than 1,000 years ago by a Persian physician. In French, we call him Avicenne, and in English, Avicenna. So where he said in one of the textbooks, the experimentation must be done with the human body, whatever he meant experimentation in the year 1000. Because testing a drug on a lion or a horse may not prove anything about its effect on a human. Kind of a little scary. What are the most modern clinical trials that we know it now? If you study the field of history of medicine, the major clinical trial highlighted is this by James Lind in 1747. The sailors, people used to sail around the world, sailors, pirates, and others for months and years. And one of the major diseases that we don't see anymore, I have never seen a case, is scurvy. The scurvy is due to a deficiency, a severe deficiency in vitamin C. And that leads to gum disease, to the teeth falling, and to neuropathy, and eventually to death. And James Lind has proven in the first clinical trial, at least documented, that fruits can cure scurvy, and he compares the effect of various acidic substances such as vinegar, citrus fruit, to nothing in these sailors. And as you know, when you're on a trip, or when you're for several months on a ship, there is nothing really fresh. People used to eat fish, cooked stuff, grains, but really no fresh foods, no lemon. And he found that the group that was given oranges or lemon recovered within 6 days compared to the group that was not given. And that's one of the first, clinical trials that is well documented. What are the type of clinical trials? And if you start reading and going over the internet, in general, two types: an observational type, where researchers collect the data but do not really manage to study, or an interventional, easy to understand. It's an intervention where patient will receive a therapy or drug and compared to patient receiving a standard of care. Sometimes the standard of care is placebo. Example, in patients that get the kidney out, even if they have stage 3 disease, we know that we cannot change their course of disease. And normally we follow them closely. It's like, you know, doing nothing. So that's an example, observational versus interventional. We also can divide the clinical trial in terms of phases. And there are several, you know, phases here. Phase 1, that doesn't need a lot of patients, looks essentially at the drug safety, completely new drugs or a combination of drugs. And mostly all approved drugs have to go through that process. Phase 2, where after you get, you know, some evidence that this combination of this particular drug is safe at this particular level, you test the drug efficacy in a single cancer type. Now, of course, in phase 1 also, one of the secondary objectives, it cannot be, it's hard to be a primary objective, is to go see responses. So even in a phase 1, if you have 20 patients, and you see a couple of patients where, let's say with adrenal cancer, this is a tumor above the kidney, and it's a very rare tumor, show responses. This is a tumor that usually do not respond to treatment. Then that can be used for a rationale to go to a phase 2 to test the efficacy of a drug in a single cancer type. And then we come to the large phase 3 trial, and these are the trials that leads in general to approval or not of a particular drug or combination, where you compare your new or your quote-unquote promising treatment to several other drug regimens that were used. And these are what we call the randomized intervention trial. And occasionally, to gain more experience, we have post-marketing or expanded access, meaning, let's say this drug is not available in a particular place or for a particular, particular indication, and the company and the doctor and the patient want to gain more information about it. So that could be an expanded access program about a certain drug. And remember that the number of patients needed increased for each phase of the trial because the objectives are different. So for example, to compare a trial between two different regimens and to say drug X gives me around 12 months of benefit, and let's see if drug Y is better, and for example, up to 16 months. We go to the statistician puts some numbers in the computer and say, if you really need to prove that, you need to have enough power, 80, 90% power. Therefore, you need 900 patients. It's all based on event, it's all, you know, statistics. Where here, we're just looking at sometimes at the response and how the drug, it's less, I would say, rigorous in terms of going to the next level. And of course, in general, once you go from phase 1, phase 3, phase 2, phase 3, not only you need more patients, but the commitment becomes more in a way, and the cost of a particular trial, you know, becomes more. What are some definitions I like to highlight that you may be reading so that we all understand and talk about the same subject? In general, phase 3 drug trials and some phase 2 are designed to be randomized, double-blind, and placebo-controlled. But what does that mean? So what's a randomized trial? Meaning each study subject, by lot, is randomly assigned to receive either the study treatment or a placebo. And knowing that a placebo, if it's justified, you know, yes or no. And the blind, meaning the subject involved in the study, do not know which study treatment they receive. And double blind is also the doctor doesn't. Why is that? Because there's a lot of bias in the interpretation, you know, of the results sometimes if you know what drug, you know, you're receiving. Example, if a doctor, let's say, believes that this treatment for whatever reason is better, may tend to keep the patient on this particular treatment even if the growth or the side effects, if the growth is bad or the side effects are worse. There's an inherent bias in patient, in physician, in everyone, if sometimes they know, you know, what they are on. Now, a lot of times, because we are very familiar with the side effect profile of some of the drugs, we can really, we can figure out if the patient is on something. An example I want to tell you about is one of the, what we call the adjuvant studies in patients that have resected kidney cancer. There was a study run by the cooperative group in the United States that randomized patients to placebo versus Nexavar versus Sutent. And this was blinded. People get pills